Hello friends, here I am with next part of this story. I hope you all like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start the video with summary. After being brought to the world of the Olympians, Naruto discovers he is the son of a goddess and therefore a half-blood. But Susa's Master Bolt goes missing and Naruto joins Percy Jackson into returning the bolt to the king of the gods before time runs out. Chapter 9. Before the claiming Artemis, goddess of the moon and the hunt, sat on a silver sofa in her palace on Mount Olympus as she watched her son compete in his first capture the flag game at Camp Half-Blood. This was the moment she had been waiting for over the last 8 months. To show the world that Naruto was her son and her one and only true child. Sitting next to her was Hestia, goddess of the hearth and mother of her love, and Naruto's father Minato Namikaze. She too wanted to show the world that Naruto was part of her bloodline and show everyone just how special Naruto is. Artemis looked at her and with proud eyes, she remembered the sad day when she returned from the elemental nations after the attack and leaving her son behind and having to inform Hestia that her son met an untimely death. The hurt could evidently be seen on the elder god's face when she was told and had dropped to the ground sobbing as Artemis comforted her. Hestia was like her. She would only fall in love the one time and have however many children with that one person, which resulted in Minato. She always regretted not being able to raise Minato and cursed the ancient laws just like Artemis did, since she did not want to leave Minato behind but was left with no choice. However, Artemis managed to break her out of her sobs when she informed Hestia that she and Minato had a son and that Hestia was a grandmother. Even though she was sad, Hestia still managed to smile when she was told that she had a grandson, but felt her heart break at hearing that he had to become a Jinchuriki to stop the nine-tailed fox. Everyone on Olympus who had been to the elemental nation knew how Jinchuriki were treated and viewed upon by others. Knowing what her own grandson would have to go through was tough on her, but Artemis told her she left him in good hands. Then 14 years later, when Artemis informed her that Naruto was now in their world, Hestia was horrified hearing the kind of things people did to him and the state Artemis had found him in. For the first time ever, Artemis saw unbridled anger in Hestia's eyes. Ever since then, Hestia had silently watched over Naruto whenever she could, since Artemis was busy with her duties with the hunt. Despite that, Artemis and Hestia grew close over the years and had formed a very mother and daughter-like bond. When many had questioned how the two suddenly became so close, they would just tap their noses and be on their way. The two watched the iris message and watched as Naruto made clones of himself and sent them away to gather information, something that impressed Artemis with his use of his shadow clones. After that, his team got the information they needed. He left and stayed in a tree above the creek where his friend Percy was guarding and watched over him. He is just like Minato, Artemis said. He is always protecting people. Something I think he inherited from you, she said to Hestia, who smiled at her. I'm just glad Naruto knows the value of friendship and that he cares enough for his friend to protect them instead of looking only for glory, she said, getting a nod from Artemis. Then they patiently watched until they saw 5 of Ares' children appear. Artemis frowned a little when she saw Naruto take on 4 while Percy took on 1. But that frown quickly became a big grin when she saw how quickly and effortlessly Naruto disposed of the Ares kids and had a proud look on her face when he used hunting knives and a bow. He may look a lot like his father, but he definitely has his mother's skills, Hestia said, getting a happy nod from Artemis. When it was finished and they saw that the blue team had won, both were prepared to begin claiming Naruto before they saw a bright light appear above Percy and the trident symbol for Poseidon appeared. Father won't be happy about that, Artemis said, and as she did, thunder boomed in the sky. What do they make O's that they know they won't keep, Hestia said, shaking her head. I don't think we can really talk about O's anymore, Artemis said, playing with her dress. They continued to watch, but both Artemis and Hestia both felt a wave panic hit them when they saw a hellhound from the fields of punishment leap out the bushes and charge towards the group. When they both saw Naruto engage the hellhound, Artemis gripped Hestia's hand a little tightly in worry for her son, but exhaled in relief when she saw him use the Rasengan on the hellhound and then send it back to the underworld with 2 arrows. Now's the time, Artemis whispered as she closed her eyes and focused her energy on her son. It only took a few seconds before Artemis's symbol appeared above Naruto's head. She saw his disbelief on her son's face and could not blame him, since everyone knew she hated meals. While that was still true, the only exceptions were of course Naruto and Minato. She also chuckled at the looks of disbelief that everyone was giving. Just as they were about to bow to Naruto, Hestia then claimed Naruto and her symbol then appeared above his head. She too giggled when she saw the looks on everyone's face. They both saw Chiron bow and proclaim, "Hail Naruto Uzumaki, son of Artemis, goddess of the moon and the hunt and descendant of Hestia, goddess of the hearth." When they did, both goddesses closed their eyes, mentally preparing for what came next. With Apollo in his temple made of solid gold watching the capture the flag game and cheering loudly as the team his children were on one, Apollo, god of the sun and prophecy and twin brother to Artemis, picked up his iPod and began doing a small victory dance as he began to think of ways to rub in the victory to the gods of the children on the other team. Though he and Artemis were twins, Apollo always informed he was the older sibling despite being the same age. This did not go well with Artemis as she would constantly scold Apollo, especially after he would flirt with her hunters. It was safe to say Artemis was the more mature one of the two. Apollo had golden blonde hair and blue eyes and looked like your typical teenage boy with California tan skin and good looks, while he was wearing a simple red shirt with jeans and sneakers. He was not paying attention to what was happening on the Iris video, especially with what was happening at the end of the game, and did not see Percy get claimed by Poseidon or watch Naruto defeat the Hellhound as he began to do the Michael Jackson moonwalk across his palace. When the song he was listening to ended, he was about to put on another song when he heard "Hail Naruto Uzumaki, son of Artemis, goddess of the moon and the hunt and descendant of Hestia, goddess of the hearth." Apollo just froze mid-step and dropped his iPod to the ground, which ended up smashing. Slowly he turned his head and let his eyes widen to the size of dinner plates when he saw his sister's symbol glow above the head of the blonde-haired boy that sent the Eris children packing. "No way," he whispered before he suddenly shouted, "And no way!" He ran out of his temple and darted towards his sister's temple, hoping to get answers. "Little sis, why didn't you tell me?" he shouted like a kid who was left out of a secret. With Aphrodite and Ares, the goddess of love was currently seated on the lap of her lover boyfriend in her temple and had him in a deep kiss, wearing a very tight and small pink nightgown. She was hardly paying attention to the capture the flag game in the background since her children mostly stayed out of it. Thought she could feel Ares tense since he was not happy about his children being beaten by the newly discovered son of Poseidon. Aphrodite's looks could constantly change due to being the goddess of beauty, but currently she had blonde hair that curled into ringlets at the end with ivory-colored skin and brown eyes. Ares meanwhile had cropped up black hair and was buffed up to the max, which made him look like a very intimidating person. He currently wore sunglasses around his eyes with eyes made of red fire. The god and goddess were not exactly close with Artemis since said goddess did not believe in love or like males, so naturally she and Aphrodite would clash at times, which mostly involved Aphrodite trying to set her up with one of the gods or a mortal. Each time Aphrodite was sent packing. With Ares, she thought he was just an overgrown chimp who couldn't keep it in his pants. As the two were making out, Aphrodite was about to take the kissing to the next level before she and Ares both heard "Hail Naruto Uzumaki, son of Artemis, goddess of the moon and the hunt and descendant of Hestia, goddess of the hearth." Both Ares and Aphrodite's kissing came to a halt as their heads slowly moved towards the Iris video and saw Artemis and Hestia's symbols above Naruto's head. Both were completely silent as they tried making sense of what they just heard. The gears in Aphrodite's head began moving before out of nowhere Aphrodite let out the loudest, most high-pitched squeal the gods had ever heard. Her clothes changed into a short white dress with white heels before she jumped off Ares' lap and ran out of her temple shouting, "ITSSSSS finally happened. I want to ETAILSSSSSS." Ares meanwhile slowly followed after her as he checked he still had his hearing. "Am I deaf?" he kept shouting to himself as he tapped his ears. "With Hermes and Demeter, and here is your package." Demeter, Hermes, god of messengers and medicine, said as he handed over a wrapped up package and handed it over to the goddess of the harvest and the seasons. Said goddess took the package and Hermes looked over her shoulder to see she had been watching the capture the flag game before a big goofy grin appeared on his face. Hermes was one of the younger Olympian gods and had black hair with blue eyes that all his children seemed to inherit. He was currently wearing an everyday mailman outfit along with a mailbag strapped across his waist. Demeter also had black hair just like many of the other that was tied together with dried up pieces of grass. Her eyes were a dark brown color and she was wearing a wheat golden dress that went down to her ankles. "My boy got the flag," Hermes said with pride evident all over his face and puffed out his chest, making him look like a proud father. "Yes, joy, oh joy," she said in a monotone voice, obviously not happy that the team her children was on had lost. "Tell me why you never answer my messages, Hermes. I always end up getting voicemail." WLUSC Demeter, Hermes said, not wanting to tell her it was because she was bloody annoying and every conversation with her somehow ended up with cereal. He had over 100 messages from her weekly. "Hail Naruto Uzumaki, son of Artemis, goddess of the moon and the hunt and descendant of Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Both whipped their heads around and saw the symbols above Naruto as their jaws fell wide open and both feeling weak in the knees at the proclamation. "Well, this is a surprise," Martha the Snake said as she too saw the Iris video. "About time they found some loving," George said before Hermes quickly silenced the two. Both god and goddess looked at each other, getting over the initial shock before nodding and teleporting away at the same time, while Hermes was thanking Artemis for the perfect timing since he could not think of a decent lie to tell Demeter since she somehow always knew when he was lying. With Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle, sat in her grand library with a proud smile on her face as she just watched her daughter Annabeth lead her team to victory over the Ares cabin and their allies. She was also impressed at how the young man Naruto, who her daughter seemed to have taken a liking to, had gathered the information which helped them win. It was a genius way if she did say so herself, and was also impressed at how he handled himself against the Ares children. However, she frowned when Poseidon had claimed his son when he had an oath to stick to and muttered, "Stupid barnacle beard." She then watched as a hellhound attacked but was defeated quickly by Naruto, who used a technique she did not recognize and would have to find out about it later since she was fascinated by those from the elemental nations and was always ready to learn new things. Athena had black hair that was tied into a braid with golden ribbons and had stormy gray eyes that all her children inherited. She currently wore a regal white dress along with golden sandals. She and Artemis were friendly enough towards each other and both had some respect for each other since both were strong female warriors which differed from the other goddesses. This helped form an understanding between the two and helped form a sort of sisterly bond. As she watched, she just took a drink of water from a glass jug beside her when she saw Artemis's and Hestia's symbols appear above his head, which made her spit out her drink in disbelief and caused the Iris video to ripple from the water. "What?" she shouted, getting a little taken back before dashing out of her temple, intent on getting to the bottom of what she just saw. With the hunters of Artemis all sat round the fire with both shock and disbelief shown evident on their face at what they had just seen and heard. Their lady had just claimed that she had a child and a son, no less. Many had dropped their plates of food on the floor when they saw it and were even more taken back when Hestia had also claimed him. Their lady would not have a child. They were her children, not some boy. After a quick silence, many of the girls jumped up from their seats with anger and confusion on their faces, shouting out their thoughts and scaring the nearby animals. "This has to be a trick. Lady Artemis would never have a child, especially have a dumb boy," one of the hunters called out with many in agreement. "It's that camp. I bet this is just a trick for all the times we beat them," another with a bit of smugness in her voice. "Lady Artemis would never break her oath. Never." "What do you think?" Z thud. A loud sound of something hitting the floor echoes through the camp and everyone turned around and looked panicked when they saw their lieutenant had passed out from shock. "Zoe!" they all shouted as they gathered round her and began fanning her and checking her over. "Boy, stupid boy," she murmured while she unconscious. "Kill blonde boy, kill." Back with Artemis and Hestia, both Artemis and Hestia took some deep breaths as they felt spikes of energy all over Olympus and felt them all heading their way towards Artemis's temple. Only a minute passed when the doors to her palace swung open. Artemis looked over and was not surprised to see that it was her twin brother Apollo who arrived first. He was looking at her with a hurt face, which she thought was most likely because she hadn't told him any sooner. However, that look quickly changed to the biggest smile she had ever seen on him in a long time before he rushed towards her, picked her up in a hug and spun her around. "What didn't tell me? My little sis is finally a mama. Tell me who the man is that managed to earn my sister's love," he said with glee as Artemis rolled her eyes before knocking him on the head, signaling to put her down. "Don't ever do that again," she said in a scolding tone to her twin. "I have my reasons why I did not tell you, and secondly, don't call me little sis. We are twins. We are the same age," she said for the millionth time. Fine, he waved, but the smile on his face never faded. "I feel a haiku coming on," he said, getting a groan from Artemis and a giggle from Hestia. "Sis is a mama. She kept me out of the loop, but I am happy." Artemis face-palmed at her brother idiotness before her eyes widened in horror when she heard the clicking of heels getting closer and the sound of squilling. Oh no, she thought before the person she was dreading the most appeared. Aphrodite appeared in front of her before she too wrapped Artemis in an uncomfortable hug, squealing like a mad schoolgirl who had too much sugar. "Why didn't you tell me?" she squealed. "I want to know everything. How did you meet? What did he look like? What was your first date like? How big was his whoa?" Artemis said, putting her hand on Aphrodite's mouth. "Do not finish that sentence," she growled out, causing Aphrodite to roll her eyes but still have a look of excitement. Fine, but I want to hear all about it, she said in a sing-song voice, sitting down on one of the sofas next to Apollo. I also would like to hear it, Athena said, walking into the palace, giving a firm nod to Artemis before sitting on the couch with the others. Slowly, one by one, other gods and goddesses appeared in Artemis's temple, all with the intention of finding out about what just happened. Hermes and Demeter arrived just after Athena, who was then followed by Ares, and then Hephaestus, who could be heard a mile away with the metal on his right leg making a clunking sound on the ground. Her half-brother looked like he usually did, with a blacksmith's apron around his waist along with a black vest and orange jumpsuit pants which showed off his misshapen head and right shoulder but did display his muscular form he had gained from being a blacksmith. Though he was clean, thankfully, since she knew how filthy he got from working in the forges. After that, Artemis along with everyone else were surprised to see Hera also walk and seemingly wanting answers too. It was surprising since Artemis and Hera had never exactly been close, and she along with Athena, Apollo and Hermes were symbols of Zeus's infidelity in Hera's eyes. Hera currently had brown hair that, like Athena, was tied in golden ribbons and went down her back and had chocolate brown eyes. She was taller than most of the other goddesses and wore a white dress that rippled like oil on water. She eyed Artemis and Hestia before she took a seat next to her sister Demeter. As Artemis looked around, she saw the only ones missing were her father Zeus and her two uncles Poseidon and Hades. So I take it you all want answers, she said, glancing at everyone who all nodded back. You can imagine our surprises when we find out two of the three virgin goddesses are not virgins anymore, Hera said coolly, glancing between Artemis and her sister Hestia. I assure you we will explain, Sister Hestia said calmly as Hera nodded back to her sister. Very well. We will explain in a moment, but there are a few others who will want to hear this as well, Artemis said before clicking her fingers, and from beside the sofas the hunters appeared in a bright light. Zoe, who had been passed out and had regained conscious minutes earlier, was trying to calm the hunters down but stopped when she and everyone realized they were not in the forest anymore. They looked around and saw the other gods staring at them and immediately bowed before they all saw Artemis standing in front of them. As soon as they did, the girls started yelling and protesting what they just saw and how someone was trying to frame their Lady Artemis and that she would never have a child, especially not a son. Artemis rubbed her forehead. She knew they would act like this and was not surprised that they were so angry and confused at what they saw. Girls, enough, she said quickly, silencing them with a commanding voice. Go and take a seat. I'm about to explain what is going on, she said as Zoe gave her a questioning look before she along with the hunters took a seat on some more sofas Artemis had conjured for them. As everyone was now seated, Artemis saw them all staring towards her as they waited for answers. She looked at Hestia, who gave her a warm smile before she took a deep breath before she began speaking. As you are aware, moments ago a young boy from Camp Half-Blood was just claimed and he had my symbol above his head as well as Hestia, she said, getting nods from everyone. First, I would like to confirm that yes, Naruto is in fact my son, she said, getting looks of shock from the hunters and others since many never believed Artemis would ever find some to settle down with. The hunters never even imagined that their lady would fall in love with someone. She took a seat next to Hestia and began her story. Just over 16 years ago I traveled to the elemental nations. It was my first trip there and I wanted to see what that world was like compared to this world. As I walked through the forests during one of the many walks, I was admiring how untouched the forests were before I was ambushed by a group of bandits who believed me to be some common woman and planned to rob me, she said, getting growls erupt from the hunter before continuing. However, before I could draw my bow or my knives, all the bandits were sent flying away and hit the ground either unconscious or were killed. All I saw was a yellow flash, but after a few seconds a man stood before me with golden blonde spiky hair, tan skin and had sapphire blue eyes. He wore a blue shirt with a green flak jacket, blue pants with black ninja sandals and a white coat with flames at the bottom. That was the day I met Minato Namikaze, she said with a warm smile on her face as she remembered seeing her love for the first time. The one you fell in love with, Aphrodite said happily with her arms in the air while Artemis nodded. Yes, he was, although it didn't start out that way. At first I hated him for being a man, of course, and for helping me since I could defend myself, but he let my rudeness slide and he brought me to his home village Kanea, the village hidden in the leaves. It turned out that Minato was the current Hokage of the village. The Hokage being the leader, she said to the hunters who didn't understand what Hokage was. He was out on a walk taking a break from his duties when he found me. He gave me a place to stay and gave me a tour of the village despite my protests, but he was not having any of it. He came and checked on me every day to see how I was doing, which annoyed me to no end and found him to be getting on my nerves. but yet over time I began finding his presence oddly comforting and enjoyable. I was beginning to find myself almost drawn to him because he acted so different from other males that I had met. He was kind to all those around him. He protected those close to him. He was incredibly smart and strong. Handsome? Aphrodite asked, interrupting again. Very, Artemis said, smirking, taking Aphrodite back a little since she never thought she would hear Artemis say a man was handsome. To everyone else it was just so foreign to hear Artemis talk about a male this way. He sounds like the perfect package, Aphrodite said lovingly, getting an annoyed look from both Ares and Hephaestus. I must admit he sounds like someone I could get on well, Athena said, pitching in too. Very rare for those types of men to come around. Well, from then on we came to a mutual friendship before slowly things began to escalate between us. It was little thing like friendly hugs or laughing at each other's jokes or just chatting about things we had in common. Jokes? Apollo asked, looking like he didn't believe her since Artemis never joked before she threw a cushion at the sun god's face. Before I knew it I found myself actually beginning to fall for him, she said, getting little smiles from the goddesses while the hunter just had blank looks on their faces, not sure how they should react. It was after about 6 months that I stayed there when I decided to reveal myself to Minato and tell him who I was. Surprisingly enough, he already knew who I was when he first met me, Artemis said, getting questioning looks from everyone. How did he know you were a goddess? Demeter asked. Before Artemis could speak, Hestia spoke up for the first time. That is actually where I come in, Hestia said, getting everyone's attention moving to her. Well, the reason Minato knows about the Greek gods is because he is a demigod, she said, surprising everyone who was listening. Naruto is my descendant in a way because he is my grandson. Wait, Hira said, piping up. If Naruto is your grandson, then that means Minato is my son, she said, getting looks of disbelief from everyone in the room. I had Minato almost 40 years ago, just before the start of Second Shinobi War in the Elemental Nations. His father unfortunately died during the war and Minato was left without a father and was put in an orphanage. I had wanted to raise Minato myself, but with the ancient laws in place I couldn't. So instead I would talk to Minato in his dreams. That's how he knew about his heritage and about all of us. So he knew who Artemis was because you had told him about us, Athena said, clarifying it, to which Hestia nodded. That's right. I wanted him to know of his heritage and who I was. I wanted him to know he was loved and that I did not abandon him. When I told him, he simply hugged me and told me he was just happy to know his mom loved him. From then on I visited from time to time, but when I saw him become Hokage I knew that he would be okay and that he would have a family of his own one day, so I eventually stopped visiting, wanting to leave his life in peace. It was then that he met Artemis. And why did you not tell us, sister? Do you not think we should have been told? Hera asked, narrowing her eyes at her older sister, while Hestia, keeping her calm, simply smiled. I could have, but I didn't. I am a private person, Hera, and I don't see the need to have to tell you everything, she said, causing Hera to make a tisk sound, obviously not happy with the answer. Everyone rolled their eyes at the moody queen of the gods as Artemis continued. I was skeptical at first, but after learning he was a demigod it made it easier to be around him, knowing I did not have to hide who I was from him. When he told me, it didn't bother him that she was a goddess in the slightest. He continued treating me just like before. It was that day when I decided to give him a chance and prove he was nothing like that bastard Orion, Artemis said, regaining the conversation and causing the hunters and Apollo to growl at Orion's name. I can honestly say it was perhaps one of the greatest times in my immortal life being with Minato. He was just so warm to be around and so full of love. He made me feel like I was the only one who was important, she said, getting loving sighs from Aphrodite. Smiles from the other girls and even Zoe and the hunters let small smiles appear on their faces since they saw how happy the lady looked. After 8 months together I discovered I was pregnant with Naruto. I was unsure of what to do since I had not been prepared for it and was not sure whether Minato would accept it since it was so soon, but when I went to the hospital and saw my baby for the first time on the monitor I just fell in love with my son. The fact my first child would be a boy meant very little. He would be loved and that was all that mattered. So I carried him for 9 months, and when I told Minato he was delighted to find out he would be a father. Whoa, wait, Aphrodite said, halting the conversation. You actually carried Naruto like a mortal, does, she said in disbelief, getting a nod from Artemis. And you still have that kind of figure? She said, causing everyone to roll their eyes at the love goddess. While Artemis scolded Aphrodite on the stupid question she asked, Hera looked at Artemis with slight admiration, which was not often. The fact that she carried her son just like the old ways and the way Hera believed a child should be born since it was the natural way made Hera's respect for Artemis go up even if it was only a tiny bit. Anyway, I bonded with Naruto as I carried him, and then on the 10th October I gave birth to him and he was born absolutely perfect with no complications, she said, getting smiles all around except from Ares, who was getting bored. A friend I had made while in Konoha was going to help deliver Naruto, but she mysteriously disappeared earlier that day. Unfortunately, the happy occasion quickly ended, she said, balling her fists up, getting concerned looks from everyone. Konoha was then attacked by the 9-tailed demon fox, she said with venom in her voice as the other gods went wide-eyed except for the hunters. She quickly explained what it was before they too went wide-eyed. The 9-tailed fox was no joke. I was weak from just giving birth, so I could not help fight, and Minato had to protect the village since it was his duty as Hokage. I had passed out from just giving birth, and when I woke up the previous Hokage of the village, Hiruzen Sarutobi, told me what happened, she said, choking back a sob, causing the others to be concerned and Hestia to squeeze Artemis's hand in comfort. And Minato had given his life to protect the village and had to seal the fox into Naruto, she said, letting a tear roll down her cheek as the others looked at her with shock and disbelief. Artemis's son had been made into a Jinchuriki. The poor boy, Demeter whispered out as Athena explained to the hunters exactly what a Jinchuriki was and the harsh lives a Jinchuriki ends up going through. Even Ares grew a tiny bit of respect for the boy since all the gods were aware of the harsh lives Jinchurikis lived. I wanted to take Naruto with me and raise him myself, but the damn ancient laws stopped me from doing so, she said in a shaky tone, which made her Lieutenant Zoe get up and take a seat next to Artemis and take her other hand in her own and help comfort her. I left him with people I thought I could trust, but I later found out that the moment I left, 3 of the 4 turned their back on him. He basically grew up with no one since Hiruzen was old and had his duties as Hokage again and just did not have the time to raise a child. Sis Apollo said, getting up and wrapping his sister in a hug, which she actually allowed and hugged back. Then 8 months ago I went to check on him for the first time. My motherly instincts were just telling me to go. I saw him wrapped in metal wire near death while shinobi, civilians and children his own age were calling for his death, she said angrily, which sparked everyone's anger levels to rise since no child should have to go through that. Poor nephew, Apollo thought as he let Artemis go and went back to his seat. When I found out the lives he had to live, I took him out of that world and brought him to ours. I enrolled him at a school which happened to be where Poseidon's son was until eventually he went to Camp Half-Blood. Everyone in the room soaked in the story as they thought over Artemis's son. They guessed he looked more like his father since there were not many similarities between him and Artemis except his skill with a bow and hunting knives. He will grow up to be a very powerful demigod, Hera said, getting nods from everyone. He has already displayed that tonight. HM, the punk ain't bad, Ares said, finally speaking up. Could make a good challenge since he has the fox within him, he said, grinning before the look was wiped off his face from the glare Artemis was giving him, and got a slap on the back of the head from Aphrodite. Stay away from my son Ares. If I find out you have hurt him in any way, shape or form, I will be sticking an arrow where the sun doesn't shine, she said, surprising everyone at how protective she was. Someone's protective, Hermes whispered to Hephaestus before she gave him the same look that shut him up. Oh, I will make he has such a great love life. There are already so many girls that are falling for him, Aphrodite said, and then Artemis gazed over towards her. She would have retorted, but the hunters were shuffling around nervously in their seats. Girls, may I ask what your opinion about this are? She asked, seeing the girls glance between themselves. They looked a little nervous and she could not blame them. She doubted this was a situation they ever imagined they would get into. My lady, Zoe said next to Artemis. We are not sure what to think. The fact that he is a boy already puts him in a bad light with us, but if he is your son and if he is like Minato, then we guess he would be okay with us. But we just don't know. We have to meet him to actually tell you what we think of him. It was a reasonable answer and probably the best answer she could have hoped for from them. Artemis looked at the other hunters. Do you all feel like this way, she asked, getting nods from the hunters. Then the room just fell into silence. Well, I think that is enough excitement for one day, Hera said, standing up and breaking the silence. I believe it's time we all left. We came here for answer and we have been given them, she said as everyone began shuffling. I wish your son the best, Hera said before exiting. Artemis found that a little hard to believe but let it slide. The others slowly began to leave as well. Before she left, Athena approached Artemis. If it's okay with you, at some point in time I would like to see the seal that keeps the fox at bay just so I can examine it and make sure it is doing its job, she said. I would like that, Artemis said gratefully, since she knew Athena has studied up on the sealing arts before. Athena nodded and teleported away. I'll try and watch over my nephew from time to time to make sure he is okay, Apollo said before he teleported away. Usually he was all playful and silly, but this was one of the rare moments that Apollo acted serious. He may not show it much, but Apollo was very protective of his sister, something she secretly liked. Lastly, it was Hephaestus who appeared in front of A and clicked his fingers. When he did, a bright light formed on one of the sofas, which eventually revealing a large box with a silver bow around it. The order you made a month ago has been finished. I believe I understand who it is for now, he said, getting a thank you from Artemis before Hephaestus then left as well. I told you it would all work out well in the end, Hestia said, hugging Artemis, to which she hugged back in the nerves form earlier had gone. I'll come and see you again soon, she said before Hestia disappeared in a column of flames. Artemis took a deep sigh, thankful that the other gods were okay with everything that happened, but knew she may have to watch Ares, since Ares was always looking for a fight and was a little afraid he may challenge Naruto. Girls, she said, turning to the hunters. Are you ready to go back to camp? She asked, getting happy nods from everyone. Also, thank you for being so understanding tonight. I know it must not have been easy to hear, but I am grateful, she said, getting small smiles from her hunters. It's okay, my lady, one of the hunters said. Since he is your son, perhaps he won't be so bad, she said, getting nods. We were a little confused and angry at first, but after hearing the story, and since you said he was like his father, who was a good person who respected women and treated them kindly, perhaps it would not be so bad to have a brother, she said, getting nods from everyone else. Though he will have to prove himself to us, Zoe said, shipping in, getting nods from the other girls. Artemis nodded. Thank you, she said gratefully that she had her hunters with her before she clicked her fingers and teleported the box Hephaestus had left along with a note she had prepared to her cabin at Camp Half-Blood before she then teleported back to her camp with her hunters. Chapter 10. Naruto was breathing in softly as he sat down on a wooden bench next to the hearth in the center of the 12 cabins. It had been just over 15 minutes after he was claimed by his mother Artemis and Hestia, who was of some kind of relation to him. He looked up from his spot to see Chiron, Percy and all the others campers just standing there gaping at him, thinking that there must have been some kind of a mistake. Many were still in disbelief while others were finding hard to believe. They thought that the gods must have made some kind of mistake, but Chiron quickly silenced them, telling them that there is never any mistake when it comes to claiming. Mr. D had disappeared shortly afterwards, no doubt to let the other gods know what happened and to inform his father Zeus. Many were also shocked at Percy being the son of Poseidon. It had been years since there had been a demigod child from one of the big three, and many knew that Percy's presence was unfortunately a bad sign. A bad sign meaning Poseidon has also broken the pact made between the three brothers to not have demigod children anymore. So what do we do now? Naruto said as he glanced over at Percy, the newly discovered son of Poseidon. Naruto was happy that he was not only one who was the center of attention. Since Percy was the son of Poseidon, some were already beginning to distance themselves from him. Naruto looked around and saw Grover standing by Percy while glancing over to Naruto from time to time. Annabeth meanwhile was staring intently at Percy. He wasn't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but with the frown on her face he figured it was not good. Thought she was not the only one, since Clarisse no doubt was glaring daggers at Percy for destroying her favorite spear. Then there was Selena, who was smiling at him, no doubt happy for him that he finally got claimed and found out who his mother is. Though aside from her, many of the other girls were looking at him but with a predatory look on their faces. He pleaded that they weren't fangirls, but the odds were not in his favor. Well, this has certainly been an interesting night. 2 demigods claimed by parents who were a complete surprise. One in particular, however. Naruto, first I think you might want to look in a mirror, since the claiming seems to have changed a few of your physical appearances, Chiron said, with greatly confused him. What do you mean? Naruto asked, a little confused by the statement before Selena appeared in front of him and handed him a mirror. He shouldn't really be surprised that a daughter of Aphrodite had a mirror with her. He looked into the mirror, was a bit taken back at what he saw. While most was the same, he noticed that his tanned skin was slightly lighter but not by much, and the whisker marks had faded slightly. They were not as bold as before, but they could still be seen clearly. The big change was first his left eye. Instead of a blue sapphire eye, he now had a silver-colored eye that stuck out, that he had to admit looked amazing. Also on the front part of his hair he now had an auburn streak that went over a few of the spikes in his hair. Whoa, does this happen often? He asked, examining himself over and getting a little nod from Chiron. It's rare, but sometimes it does happen. I'm guessing you looked mainly like your father, so when your mother claimed you inherited a few more of her physical attributes, thus the silver eye and the auburn streak. In fact, now that we know Artemis is your mother, I must admit now that I take a good look at you, your facial structure is a lot like your mother's, Chiron said, getting very few nods from the few demigods that had actually seen Artemis before. Naruto might not have shown it, but he was happy since he knew he looked a lot like his father due to past photos he saw of him that Jiraiya had once showed him before he knew who he was. But now that he also had a few of his mom's physical looks, it made him feel even more connected with her, like he was really hers. When Naruto was done with the mirror, he gave silently the mirror back and noticed that still a lot of the girls had a predatory look on their faces that made his cheeks redden. He really was not used to this kind of attention. Well, after that rather historic moment, Chiron said, sweeping his hand through his hair and glancing between the two, we should begin moving you both into your new cabins. Percy, you will go into cabin 3, he said, pointing over towards the cabin that looked like it was made of sea rock that made into a low but sturdy building with conch shell planted all over it. And Naruto, you will go to cabin 8, he said a little hesitantly and pointing over towards the cabin that was currently glowing silver just like the moon. I guess now we understand why you felt so drawn to her cabin, Grover said. Sometimes demigods are just drawn to monuments or possession that belongs to their parent. I should have seen it back at the museum with the Artemis statue, Chiron said. But then again, we never imagined Lady Artemis would ever have a child. Yeah, a bit of a shock to find out my mom is the biggest man-hater in the world, Naruto dryly chuckled, still trying to wrap his head around it, while a few others chuckled with him. How do you think the other gods will take it? It's difficult to say. Although your mother is a respected Olympian, she did break her oath, which no doubt Zeus or a few of the other gods may not be very happy over. But I'm sure it will be okay. Artemis is not one of the gods you want to take lightly. She knows how to protect herself and no doubt has already explained to the gods. Just have faith and I'm sure all will be okay, Chiron said, patting Naruto on the shoulder. Now go get your things from the Hermes cabin and begin moving into your new cabins, he said before talking directly to Naruto. However, Naruto, I must ask what you want to do when the hunters eventually visit? He said, causing many to curse since most of the campers were not fan of the hunters. I doubt they will want a boy living in cabin 8 with them. Naruto knew Chiron was right. He may have been the son of Artemis, but he doubted the hunters would want him nearby since he was still a boy. They would most likely skin him alive then sleep under the same roof with him. Naruto said, rubbing his forehead. Is there any chance one of the other cabins mind letting me stay with them during the hunter's visit? He asked. Chiron nodded. That should be acceptable, but make sure you have to the permission of the head counselor for that cabin, and it would be best to make offerings during meal times to that god or goddess during the stay, he said, getting a nod from Naruto. Alright everyone, Chiron said, ushering everyone away. Go to your cabins. It is now past curfew, so unless you want to be harpy dinner, I suggest you get moving. Everyone began moving as quickly as possible. Naruto and Percy went with the Hermes cabin and began to pick up all their stuff, which was exact much, and handed over their sleeping bags to Luke, who put them away back into storage for another use later. They said a quick goodbye to the stalls and Luke before they left the cabin and walked to the center of the cabins. Percy looked over to the Poseidon cabin while Naruto looked over to the Artemis cabin. Well, guess I'll see you in the morning, Naruto said. Yeah, see you in the morning, Percy said, not taking his eyes off his father's cabin before making his way over. Naruto watched him walk over, open the door and enter the cabin before shutting it behind him. Guess it's me next, he said before he too began to walk over to his mother's cabin. However, before he could get halfway, he noticed that in the trees behind him Grover was standing there watching him intently, which caused Naruto to frown a little. Grover, I can see you. You know, he said, making Grover panic a little before disappearing. Naruto shook his head. Grover told him how much satyrs and nature spirits loved Artemis, and Grover had already claimed the spot as Artemis's biggest fan, which he doubted was true if the hunters had anything to do with it. Thought it was then that Naruto noticed Grover was not the only one staring. He saw all around the other cabins the other half-blood children were staring through the windows. Naruto figured they just wanted to see if he was going to be turned into an animal for going to the cabin, since many still had a hard time believing it. Thanks for the vote of confidence, everyone, he muttered to himself before he walked the rest of the way and found himself standing in front of the door. His right hand traced over Artemis's symbol before he took a deep breath, took the doorknob in his hands and pushed it open. Many of the campers that were watching through the windows held in their breath when he opened the door to the cabin. He went inside and closed it. They waited to see if they heard any screaming, any flashing lights or him being thrown out, but there was nothing. They assumed he was fine and all went to bed after one mentally exhausting day. When Naruto entered the cabin, the first thing he caught was the smell for the cabin. It smelled just like the outdoors, the smell of the forest that he was so accustomed to. He smiled. It reminded him of the forests around the Leaf Village. The walls were painted a dark green color with silver vine-like designs going along the top and bottom of the wall, and then along the walls were pictures of different animals like wolves, deers, bears and such, along with images of people with long hoods and cloaks and carrying bows and arrows. It didn't take a genius to figure out it must have been images of the hunters. As he scanned the room, he saw there must have been around 20 beds that all had silver duvets and pillows covering them. Then there were sets of drawers attached to the bottom of the beds where clothes and other accessories must have been kept. No doubt these beds were where the hunters would sleep in. Well, where in the world do I sleep? Naruto thought, scratching the back of his head. Since he noticed all beds had already been taken, he didn't really feel like pissing off a group of man-hating girls. However, the moment he spoke up, the wall at the back of the cabin began to shine. Slowly silver vine-like designs appeared and began to form a large rectangle shape that looked like a door. Then a doorknob formed midway down, now confirming to Naruto it was door. When the light went down, there was now a brand new door on the back wall that had a note on the front. Walking up to it, Naruto pulled the note out and began reading. Dear Naruto, I know that you must be surprised to find out you are my son, but please know that despite my reputation as a man-hater, you and your father are the exceptions. So do not think that I don't love or care for you, because I do. Since my hunters resides in the main part of the cabin, I had this room specifically built for you, since I don't want to make my hunters feel uncomfortable by making them share with a boy. I hope you understand. You will have everything you need in there, and I hope it is to your may change the room however you want to, but remember to keep it tidy. You have every right to stay in this cabin, my son, even more so than my hunters. I love you with all my heart, Mom. Naruto smiled as he quickly swept away a stray tear. Since he was claimed less than an hour ago, there was that nagging voice in the back of his head saying that his mom never wanted him, and with Artemis as his mom and with her reputation, there was a small part of him that believed it. But now that his mom had written to him again and confirmed that she does love and that he is the exception to her hating men, it calmed his nerves and got rid of that voice. He was just happy that his mom really did want him. He put his hand on the doorknob, opened it and scanned the room. The room was very nice, to say the least. It was a lot like the main room where the hunters slept, with same wall color and vine design, but with only the animal designs on it. However, in the center of the room, instead of a single bed, there was a king-size bed which had a dark green duvet and pillowcases covering it. He sat down on the bed and was amazed at how soft it was. There was a cabinet over to the side that caused him to go a little wide-eyed when he saw the Minotaur horn and the Hellhound tooth lying in there. There was a little note on the front of the cabinet. A trophy case for your spoils of war, love, Mom. Naruto smirked a little. He guessed that she wanted him to fill it up, since his mom technically did monster hunting for a living and was pretty much the biggest female badass you would ever meet. He looked over next to the cabinet and saw a simple wardrobe that he guessed was made of oak and had been recently made, since it still had that wild outdoors smell to it. That would come in handy for his clothes and maybe even a cloak or two in the future. Other than that, the room was a little bare, but he guessed his mom just wanted him to make it his own and do what he wanted with it. Sort of like a mom giving him his own bedroom in a way. He smiled since he knew his mom had tried to make it feel as homely as possible, and he was grateful for that. However, before he could say another word, another bright light erupted in the room, mainly on the edge of his bed. The light disappeared as quickly as it came, and now on the edge of the bed was a box with silver ribbons around it. On the top was once again another note. He put the note aside just for a moment and opened the box lid. What he saw inside left him a little taken back. Inside was a perfectly made and shaped bow that was dark brown in color and had silver vines running up and down it, but had gold outlining it. He took it out and held it like he would at archery practice and pulled the bowstring back. This is perfect, he thought, as gently let go of the bowstring. Lying next to the bow was a quiver stocked full of arrows that were silver in color and had black feathers on the end. The metal glinted and shined in the light as it showed just how sharp and dangerous they were. He picked up the note that was on top of the box. It read, as my son, you will be expected to have this. Wield this bow well and use it in times of need and to protect those you care about. The arrows are enchanted, so every arrow you fire will eventually return to the quiver. The metal is a mixture of celestial bronze and chakra metal, so you can make your shot stronger and perhaps add your wind element to them. Love Mom. Naruto shook his head. In the space for an hour he had been claimed, given a new home and cabinet, his own room and now his own bow and arrows, all thanks to his mom wanting the world to know he was her son and wanting him to be safe and to be protected. It felt a little foreign to Naruto since he never had someone who cared so much, but yet his mother, who he had never even seen or met, had done all this for him and who simply wants the best for her son and for him to be safe and loved. "You're the best, Mom," he whispered and sent a silent prayer thanking his mother, happy to know she was trying to protect him even when she is not physically there. Eventually he sealed the bow and quiver of arrows away into a small storage seal he managed to quickly create on his right wrist before he showered and went to bed. The bed and pillows were so soft the moment his head hit the pillows Naruto was sound asleep. Mount Olympus Olympian throne room. In the Olympian throne room sat on his throne at the head of the 12 Olympian seats, a man wearing a dark blue pinstripe suit with long dark gray hair and a beard that was mixed with both black and gray while his eyes were electric blue in color. This was Zeus, god of the sky and king of the Olympians. He sat there with a patient look on his face as the giant golden doors to the Olympian throne room swung open. Wearing his usual leopard patterned shirt was Mr. D, who walked up to the king of the gods and his father and gave a bow. "I take it you saw the events of tonight's Capture the Flag game, father?" Mr. D said coolly, since he knew better to hold his tongue around his father since he already was not in a great light with his father, especially ever since he was forced to be the camp director at Camp Half-Blood for chasing a wood nymph that his father had declared off limits. "Yes, I'm aware," he said with a powerful voice. It was a voice that demanded respect and was full of power. He had known about Artemis's child due to having to go to the elemental nations personally and had to convince her to come back and leave the child behind. Despite the king of the gods' reputation of being a hard ass, he hated to see his daughter in pain, but the rules had to be followed and he had to be strict. He could not be lenient. He was very surprised to see that Artemis had brought her son to their world since it had never happened before, especially one who was a Jinchuriki. He was not happy that Artemis brought a Jinchuriki to their world, but right now his main thoughts were on the son of Poseidon, who right now he loathed more than anything due to the crime he believed he had committed. "You have checked the seal on him that keep the nine-tailed fox back, yes?" he asked, getting a nod of confirmation from Mr. D. "Keep an eye on him, Dionysus. We don't need the nine tails getting loose. The last thing the gods need is that monstrosity getting loose and running around freely." Mr. D understood his father's thinking. The nine tails could match Typhon in power if it was at full power and fully released. While the gods could defeat it, it would certainly be no walk in the park, that was for sure. "And if the seal breaks?" Mr. D asked, already having an idea of what his father wants to be done with the son of Artemis. "Then he must be taken care of. If the seal breaks, then the gods will have no choice but to put him down before the fox breaks out. Put more seals on him or have Athena look over him and check it, but make sure that the cobwebby stays sealed away inside the boy. I would have him sent back to the elemental nations, but you know full well what Artemis is like. She will become enraged if we do that, and an angry Artemis is not something I enjoy having to go against." Mr. D knew exactly what he meant. An angry Artemis was not someone to be messed with. In fact, she was just as bad as Hera when she finds out about Zeus's infidelities, and that scared the crap out of Zeus whether he would admit it or not. "Very well, father," Mr. D said, getting a nod in response from the king of the gods as Mr. D turned around and began to make his way out of the throne room. Just before he got to the large golden doors, thought they pushed open again, revealing another man. He had black hair and sea green eyes and his skin was tanned. He wore a flower pattern Hawaiian shirt with khaki shorts and brown sandals on his feet. In his right hand was a long spear-like weapon that had 3 tips on the end, a trident. Mr. D knew exactly who this man was since he had just claimed his son. If anything, he looked like an older version of the brat. This was Poseidon, god of the oceans and father of Percy Jackson. Said god walked into the silent throne room, walking past Mr. D with the only noise being made was his feet hitting the ground. Poseidon nodded slightly to Mr. D as he went past and took the seat that was beside Zeus that had the trident symbol on it. When the sea god sat down, his gaze went over to his brother and was met by a furious and angry gaze, which he happily returned. Tension immediately appeared in the air and Mr. D quickened his pace. He, along with every other god or creature, knew it was not wise to get in the middle of an argument between Zeus and Poseidon. As soon as he left the throne room and the doors closed behind him, he heard the sound of furious shouts sound through the air and saw many of the minor gods and goddesses fleeing away from the throne room. All around the world, thunderstorms, Earthquakes and storms hit various parts of the world, signaling the anger of the two great brothers. Camp Half-Blood Naruto stretched as exited his cabin wearing a dark green top with black jeans and black Converses. He felt completely refreshed after having one of the best sleep he had ever had. Thank the gods for comfy mattresses. He saw people staring at him mainly with amazement while many of the girls had blushes on their faces. This is going to take some time to get used to, he thought before he walked away from his cabin and made his way to the dining pavilion. Naruto Salina called, appearing next to him, getting a smile from the blonde. How was your first night in cabin 8? Since you're alive and haven't been turned into a jackalope, I guess it went alright, she said, making Naruto playfully roll his eyes. It was great. Best night's sleep I have had in a long time, maybe even ever. Nice big king-sized bed all for me, he said, grinning to himself while Salina pouted. No fair. Why do you get the big bed and everyone else doesn't, she said, playfully slapping Naruto when he started rubbing it in. It is still amazing. To think you are the son of Artemis. I never imagined she would fall in love. From what my mom told me, she always said Artemis was someone she never thought would find love. That she would always be on her own with her Huntress swearing off love. I guess love gets you when you least expect it, even to those who don't believe in it. You've met your mom? He said, a little surprised and getting a nod from Salina. I, Annabeth, Luke, Clarice and a few others got to go to Olympus for the winter solstice. We saw all the gods and I got to spend a little bit of time with my mom. She was just like I expected, very girly and boy obsessed, but she was very beautiful and she cares deeply for her children even if she has so many. You have definitely inherited the beauty part, Naruto thought before he wanted to ask an important question. In that case, have you ever met my mom? Salina found it adorable that he was asking about his mom. He only found out about her the other day and already he cares for her and loves her, if the look on his face and look in his eyes were any indication. I didn't meet her personally, but I did see her. She had long auburn hair and had silver eyes that you inherited. She also looked very stern, but she was very beautiful. She was more naturally beautiful and I don't think she wore any makeup unlike many of the other goddesses. She then also looked at Naruto and looked at the auburn streak in his hair and his new silver eyes. Even though she liked his eyes as they were, she had to admit his silver and sapphire eyes just drew her in. They were beautiful and just captured her attention. I like the new look, by the way. It suits you. Thanks. I'm kind of glad they did change. As much as I was used to looking like my dad, I'm kind of glad I have a few features from my mom now. Makes me feel more connected to her, I guess. That's very sweet to say. Thanks, he said before the two entered the pavilion and went to sit at their respected tables. He felt a little lonely sitting on his own at the cabin 8 table. He also saw Percy sitting on his own at the cabin 3 tables eating his breakfast. The green-eyed boy looked like he had a rough night. Bad dreams perhaps, Naruto thought as he looked at his friend. He looked around and saw everyone avoiding Percy and looking at him with uneasy looks like they were scared of him. Even Clarice looked a little off around him. They also looked at him, but it was like they were just trying to figure him out since he was the first ever child of Artemis. Ars kinds were physically strong, Athena children were smart, Aphrodite children were good-looking, Hermes kids were jacks of all trades, masters of none, and so on. So no doubt they were figuring out what benefits he had. Other than his skills with a bow and hunting knives, he was still figuring it out himself. Naruto quickly ate his breakfast, which consisted of a bowl of cereal with some toast topped with strawberry jam and orange juice, before he left the dining pavilion at the same time as Percy. How did you sleep? Naruto said, appearing next to the son of Poseidon. Not too bad. Little weird being all on my own though. Just when I thought I was beginning to fit with this place, I get sent to a cabin all by myself. Naruto patted his back. Cheer up. Things will get better soon. At least now you know who your dad is and that you don't have to sleep in a cramped place anymore, Naruto said, getting a grateful look from Percy. Percy realized he was right, especially no longer sleeping cramped. That was murder on his back. As the two walked, thunder boomed in the distance and both boys saw thunderclouds in the sky. Grover had told them that bad weather never found its way into the camp boundaries, but yet there they both saw the clouds thundering over the camp and the ocean getting wild with wave getting as high as 10 meters in the air. They were both interrupted from their thoughts as their local satyr friend made his way over to them. Hey Percy, Grove called, getting both boys' attention. Chiron wants to see you in his office. Oh okay, Percy said before turning to Naruto. You coming too? Naruto thought for a moment before shrugging. Sure, I don't really have anything else to do. Chiron kind of only asked for only Percy, Grover said, stuttering. There are things that Percy has to be made aware of and things that he has to do. The look on Grover's face told Naruto more than Grover thought. The fact that he was sweating a little and looked nauseous was all Naruto needed to know. Does whatever you need to tell Percy put him in danger? Naruto asked Grover, who looked a little stressed now. Well, in a way, he said. Well, then I'm coming to then. Anything that is harmful to my friends therefore concerns me too, he said, nodding gratefully to Percy, who was happy his friend was going with him since Percy knew Mr. D did not like him all that much. Grover sighed. All right then. Let's go, he said as the satyr led the two demigods to Chiron and Mr. D, who were in their usual spot on the porch on the big house. Morning celebrities, Mr. D said in a flat tone, not even glancing towards them. Oh, thank you for bringing Percy, Grover, Chiron said when he noticed Naruto. Naruto, this only concerns if it concerns the safety of my friend, then it does concern me, he said, giving Chiron a look that I'm not going anywhere. Chiron gave a loud sigh. Although he would not say it aloud for fear of being turned into a jackalope, he now defiantly saw the resemblances Naruto had with his mother Artemis. Not only did he now have some of her physical features, but he definitely had her stubbornness too. Very well. Take a seat, boys, he said, gesturing to the chair in front of him, to which the boys happily took. Mr. D was currently reading the Wine Monthly magazine before he set it down and rubbed his eyes. Well, I'm off to Olympus for the emergency meeting, he said, getting surprised glances from the two boys. If the barnacle-beard son is still here when I get back, I'll turn him into an Atlantic bottlenose and I'll make sure he ends up in an aquarium. Do you understand? He said, getting a nod from Chiron and a worried look from Percy. And Perseus Jackson, if you're at all smart, you'll see that's a much more sensible choice than what Chiron feels you must do. Naruto then watched as Mr. D picked up a playing card, twisted it around in his hands before it became some sort of security card. Then with a click of his fingers he was gone. So what did Mr. D mean by "if I'm still here"? Percy asked with a wave of nerves hitting him while Naruto looked on in interest. He knew things were about to get interesting. Well, Percy, for the first time in 3 years I am issuing out a quest, he said, getting very surprised glances from both boys since they knew how reluctant Chiron was to give out quests. Or to be more precise, I am giving you a quest. Will you accept it? Both boys glanced at Grover, who was crossing his fingers. Percy ignored it while Naruto raised an eyebrow at it. You have not told me what it is about? Percy said, getting a nod of agreement from Naruto. If his friend was going on a quest, he too wanted to know what it was. That is the hard part, Chiron said as he looked across the camp and at the weather. Poseidon and Zeus, Percy said, they're fighting over something valuable. Something that was stolen, aren't they? He said as he got surprised looks from Naruto, Grover and Chiron. Percy went on to explain the conversation that he had with Annabeth and that she had heard of something being stolen while he told her about some sort of deadline at the summer solstice. Well, the information is correct. In the last few months, Zeus and Poseidon have been having the worst quarrel in centuries. The sky and oceans have been fighting against each other. An argument between the two brothers is one of the worst things that could happen to the world because of how powerful they are, Naruto thought to himself as Chiron explained. So far he knew that Zeus and Poseidon were fighting and that something had been stolen. Monsters had been attacking Percy because it was believed that he has something they want. Like Mrs. Dodds being a fury and saying Percy stole a lightning bolt, which made no sense. At least it didn't until now. It hit Naruto like a ton of bricks. How had he not seen it sooner? A lightning bolt, Naruto said, getting everyone's attention. Or to be more precise, Zeus's master bolt has been stolen, hasn't it? He said. He knew all about the supposed weapon that was forged by the Cyclops that helped Zeus take down the Titans in the few Greek lessons he took and from the reading he did before he came to camp. Chiron looked at Naruto before nodding. You are correct, Naruto. Zeus's master bolt was stolen during the winter solstice and has not been found since. The master bolt is a symbol of his power, from which all other lightning bolts are patterned. The first weapon made by the Cyclops for the war against the Titans, the bolt that sheared the top of Mount Etna and hurled Kronos from his throne. The master bolt, which packs enough power to make mortal hydrogen bombs look like firecrackers. Damn, was all Naruto could think. No wonder he managed to beat Kronos with that kind of weapon. Hell, a weapon like that could level a town with a single blow if necessary. The reason it involves you, Percy, is because Zeus believes he stole it, he said, getting shocked look from the two boys. Zeus believes that you took the master bolt and gave it to Poseidon so that he could make replicas of it and use them against him. He didn't know who it was at first, but when you were claimed, you immediately got the blame since you were in New York at the time. But that's ridiculous, Naruto said, speaking up. Percy didn't even know of his heritage back then. How can Zeus blame him? Chiron sighed. Unfortunately, Zeus does not always think rashly in these kind of events. Ever since Poseidon helped Hera, some of the other gods trap him in a golden net so that he would be a better ruler. Zeus has always been wary of Poseidon since Poseidon is one of only 2 gods who have the strength to match Zeus in power. Hera, Hestia and Demeter have tried to calm them down, but nothing is working. Zeus is demanding his master bolt be returned, while Poseidon is demanding that he did not do it and wants an apology from Zeus. Percy, who just sat there and listened to the old centaur, had never felt so nervous or scared in his life. The king of the gods' weapon was stolen and he was being blamed. This was a lot for a 12-year-old to take in. How bad will this get if the bolt is not returned by the summer solstice? Naruto asked. Since a problem like this could have global disastrous effects, millions could die if 2 gods went at it. Imagine the world in chaos, nature at war with itself, Olympians forced to choose sides between Zeus and Poseidon, destruction, carnage, millions dead. Western civilization turned into a battleground so big it will make the Trojan War look like a water fight in comparison. Fuck, Naruto whispered to himself while Percy put his head in his hands and Grover and Chiron looked at Percy sadly. Naruto had seen battle himself and had unfortunately seen many people die and had even taken a few live before. Since when you're a shinobi, it's pretty much in the job description. But what Chiron was describing was more like the apocalypse. And you, Percy Jackson, would be the first to feel Zeus's wrath. Then, as if the gods were listening, it began to rain on Camp Half-Blood. Campers began to run into their cabins to avoid getting wet while the Aphrodite girls were screaming slightly, their makeup getting ruined from the rain hitting their faces. So I have to find this stupid bolt and get it back to Zeus, Percy said, finally speaking up after being told he had to find the bolt or risk the world falling into a war of the gods. What better peace offering, Chiron said, than to have the son of Poseidon return Zeus's property. So if Poseidon doesn't have it, where's the bolt then? Naruto asked. I think I know. Some years ago I got a prophecy and now some of the lines are beginning to make sense now. Before we can move any further thought, you Percy have to do one thing before you take up this quest. And what's that? Percy asked, getting worried from the look Chiron was giving him while Naruto was readily listening to the suggestion Chiron was about to make and looked at Grover, who was shuffling in his seat. Naruto was preparing himself. If Percy needed his help, he would be there to stand by his side. Chiron took a deep breath before saying, Percy, it's time you went to consult with the Oracle.